Major funding for these programs is made possible by grants from Chase Commercial Term Lending and Capital One Bank, New York Community Bank, the Wolkoff Group, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Genova Burns, Gian Tomasi and Webster, Greenberg Traurig, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company. Additional funding is provided by grants from AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Colliers International NYC, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, Hap Investment Developers, Herrick Feinstein, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman USRealty.com, John Katsimides, Red Apple Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Matone Group, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, New Banks, People's United Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling & Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the CUNY TV Foundation, the Continuum Company, Urban American, and these friends.
It's a market that's growing day by day. People are buying apartments, renting apartments, shopping in the Borough of Queens. So I've assembled a group of individuals today who are going to provide us insight on what's happening in Queens. My guests, they include Andrew Barrocas, who's the CEO of MNS, David Wolkoff, who is a principal at Heartland Business Centers, Michael Meyer, who is the president of F&T Development, and last but not least, the man who has the money to provide many of the things that are happening here, Matt Petrula, who is the group vice president at M&T Bank. So, David, your family has been in what we would call 5 Points in Long Island City for 40 years.
Yes.
What has happened, and why do you see the change today in Long Island City to build a residential complex?
Well, I think it's just New York City in itself. It's just the natural growth. And as you mentioned when we were outside, as Brooklyn grows and all the other boroughs are growing, Queens is naturally going to grow. And Long Island City is so close to Manhattan. It's one stop away on the M and E lines, and it's so easy to get to. So it's a natural growth. And finally, it took, well, we thought 40 years ago we would be building a residential building there. But it's finally here. The growth has finally reached us, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop.
Now, my negative about Long Island City, I'm very positive about the area, is I believe that one thing that hasn't really come up yet is the adequate retail. I think retail hasn't been, there's a lot of retail in Queens in general for certain situations, but we don't have that much retail. Well, like TF Cornerstone and Rock Rose, they created, they provided incentives to tenants to be there. Do you see the retail growing?
Absolutely. As the critical mass gets there, the retail is going to follow, and right away. And not only retail, but we have some of the best restaurants in New York City right now. M. Wells, which I think is a Michelin star rated restaurant, is ranked up there as a top restaurant, I think the top restaurant in all of New York City.
Now, you see, if we take the other side, we go to Queens, and we were talking, it's the 50th anniversary of the World's Fair. It's also the 50th anniversary of Shea Stadium being built. Flushing. Flushing has how many dialects? 160 different dialects?
I think something along that line.
Okay, so, I mean, look at what's happening in Flushing. Today, what are you doing there? I mean, you guys have been one of the most active players in the Flushing market, and you're even getting into a market that you once were involved with, hotels.
Correct. Well, Flushing is I always say Queens is the most, by census, is the most diversified county in the country. And then you look at Flushing, I think Flushing is the most diversified ethnically in Queens. So ergo, Flushing is probably the most diversified neighborhood, if not that or Jackson Heights, in the entire country. And what changed Flushing from the 60s and 50s when it was middle class and different type of ethnic group was in the 70s when you had started to see the immigration from the Far East. First Japanese, followed by the Taiwanese and Koreans, and then the Chinese. And so now Flushing is principally an Asian, it's almost a stepping stone from Asia into the U.S. and into the New York market. They recognize what's the appeal of Flushing for these groups. We're at the terminus of the number 7 line. Main Street Station is the
Which is similar to what David is saying, you know, 1 or 2 stops to get it to Manhattan, to Long Island City is enormous. It's a great opportunity.
Flushing's 34 minutes to Grand Central, but it's a transit hub. I think it's something like 30 some odd bus lines
And the Long Island Railroad.
Long Island Railroad. So they recognize that inherent value. It was blighted in the 70s when the city went down. And then the whole phenomenon follows sort of the trajectory of Asia, the whole geopolitical thing.
So how do you, as a banker, okay? I mean, M&T, you know, has its roots, or your co-headquarters up in Buffalo. How do they, you know, how do you explain Flushing, Long Island City? You know, how do you go to credit committee and say, I want to lend on this apartment house in Long Island City, and I've never seen more cranes in Long Island City. I mean, as I said a couple of weeks ago, I walked over the 59th Street Bridge, and I'm passing right next to, the Packard building, you know, Ciampi's building, something over there. You see all these new things. How do you look at that?
It's a good question. We're bullish on Queens. You know, for all the reasons you point out, the excellent transportation access, the fact that it's still a low-cost alternative, a lower-cost alternative to Brooklyn and to Manhattan. You can get a little bit more space, our customers, know the market well, and we're following, good sponsorship that.
So here's the question. You talk about the low-cost alternative. Now I have the Maven, okay? Now I have the source, as opposed to when I would say Bob Knackel, where he would bring out the statistical information. Andrew's going to give us, what's the difference, okay? Because you're doing residential, you'll be renting for David later on when he starts opening up over there, but you're currently doing rentals and sales. What's the differential to be in Queens as opposed to be in Manhattan and in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I mean, just listening to what Matt was saying, we're doing a project for somebody who has a building on the Upper East Side that can't get his hands around the fact that we're underwriting a project in Long Island City at a higher price per foot than he's getting on the Upper East Side. So it's not as much a cost effective as it's a quality of life. And just going back to what David was saying, it is still, Long Island City is still under amenitized. But if you look at other areas like Williamsburg, for instance, which we've done a lot of work in, that area is just, now getting amenities. Whole Foods is first coming in. There was a long time where Dwayne Reed's weren't, in the area, CVS. So it's been built up quite a bit. And I think that that's something that, really builds these areas like Long Island.
But what's the differential today? What is the rent today in Long Island City and Flushing and Regal Park? And what are things selling for, on a condominium? Because, that's what people want to see. People want to live in New York City, and, they're being priced out of Manhattan. Manhattan is being too expensive, even for the Upper East Side.
Yeah, I mean, from a condo standpoint, Long Island City is a $1,000+ market now. It's challenging to find anything under $1,000 a foot there.
What about Astoria?
Astoria, you're seeing, condo sales in the 700s. Just no product that's been built there. Similar to what's happening in Long Island City, there's very little condo inventory coming to the market where you have 8,000+ rentals. But it's an area where people are attracted to right now. You have small local mom and pop shops that really build up the area.
So here's the question: who's renting and who's buying in Queens?
You have a lot of people that might have once rented in Manhattan that are.
Is there a certain age group?
It's certainly the younger demographic for sure. They're really getting priced out, of certain areas that they might have wanted to be. They're certainly more interested in moving to Long Island City than the Upper East Side.
It's interesting. A number of years ago, I remember doing shows in an area which is emerging now also, Jersey City. And I remember, I believe I had one of the Lefracks, Jamie, on the show, and they were amenitizing the building by putting, a daycare for the kids and certain other situations. Do you think that's what's going to have to be done in certain buildings in Long Island City to get the people there?
Well, we're doing it anyway. I mean, we have the size. We're about 1.3 million square feet, 1,100 units. So we are putting in all those amenities. And in any many you can really think of, media rooms. We have a 12,000 square foot gym, indoor swimming pool, 2 golf simulators, barbecue areas, outdoor seating areas. So we're providing that all for our tenants, creating a little community within ourselves. But that is to attract the young core group of people who we expect to be our renters. We're also expecting empty nesters. I believe that a lot of the newer buildings will be putting in all these amenities to attract the renters.
What are you going? I mean, you have a new hotel opening with the condos next to it, with the retail and the office, and then you have the major complex. What are you planning to do?
Well, the Flushing Commons complex, which is a city sponsorship deal that it's mixed use, and we're building with our partners, Rockefeller Group and Acon Capital. But that will have office condominium, residential condominium, retail, underground parking, and over an acre in park area.
Now, will the residential condominium be price fixed that you can't will be open market?
The retail?
Not the retail, the residential.
Yes. No, it's not affordable. It's going to be luxury condominium. The market area, as we talked about before, is heavily Asian, predominantly Chinese. The Chinese have a ownership mentality when it comes to real estate. So even though when the financing wasn't there and we looked at residential maybe doing multi-housing, we couldn't do it. The market wouldn't support it. The rentals weren't there. So this is going to be top of the line. It's going to be the leading property. And as you mentioned before with the hotel, we're having the first Hyatt hotel in Queens, and that's just an indication of just how how it's booming.
What about, and I brought this up prior to the show when I was walking around Astoria in Queens and Long Island City. There are an enormous number of hotels being built in Queens. I want your opinion as being an owner over there, you being involved, and then I'm going to ask the banker. I mean, I understand hotels, and, I'm bullish on hospitality, but there's a question of how many people are running to Long Island City to be at a hotel. Flushing, because there's a lot of people who are Asian who are coming out there.
But I agree with you. I think what you're seeing in Flushing is this proliferation of small hotels. I mean, Hyatt Place is a limited service hotel, but it's mixed use, it's central location. You're seeing secondary and tertiary product coming in. And I think in the next downturn, my background is hotel development, I think they'll get hurt in the next downturn.
To me, the Long Island City is growing so much, and it's so easy to get to. It's going to be very popular. It's already getting very popular. It's easy to get to Brooklyn from Long Island City. It's easy to get into Manhattan from Long Island City, and certainly to get in and out of the airport to the airports. It's great. So as its popularity grows, I believe that there is going to be a demand for hotel rooms, as there is now for hotel rooms. If there is a downturn, I can't speak to that, but I would assume that it would hold up pretty well.
As a banker?
There has been quite a bit
and
of
a lender who does a lot of business in hospitality.
Yeah, there has been a lot of hotel construction in Long Island City, and Brooklyn is still somewhat underserved in hotels. So I think to some extent it'll.
But I think part of what David brought up originally earlier in the show is the convenience of Long Island City for hospitality is really worthwhile because it's only the 1 or 2 stops away. And most of the hotels are being built literally within a certain small proximity. They're close to each other. You don't see many residential things. You see more hotels being built in that cluster over there, in that, not too far from Astoria. While on the residential, you see it more throughout. Hunters Point, it's going to Court Square. It's moving around the market over there.
Yeah, I think it makes sense that it'll serve as sort of for spillover of Manhattan travelers that are looking to stay in Manhattan, maybe at a low cost alternative, or
Yeah, I mean,
or in Brooklyn for the same reason.
I think that's exactly what it is. I mean, we're doing a project on 11th Street right now in Long Island City, and there's a hotel, a Z Hotel, and I passed by and just popped in to see, how many rooms they had on like a weekday. They had no rooms available, and I asked the question of, who's coming here to stay, and it's mostly tourists. It's a less expensive alternative. It's a couple $100. You're literally, you could walk over the 50th
Right. I
Bridge.
mean, recently it opened up. I think in December, the Paper Factory opened up. Paper Factory is a 100-year-old building that once served as a paper factory, and they're keeping some of the presses, around the facility, and they made it 120 rooms, and part of it is even dormitories. They have bunk beds and so on in this situation.
Hostels you're seeing built in Long Island City too. There's somebody who's doing quite a few of them and been very successful with them. One
of the things that happened in Flushing a couple of years ago was the Oxford Properties. It's now Oxford Properties, with the Must development over there. How's that doing now? Skyview on the park.
Well, they've recovered. They went through a real tough patch. Onyx took it over, and they had the misfortune of poor timing at the beginning of the marketplace, and then they had some construction issues. But they recently just sold out. We actually assisted them, helping them on the sales of their 3rd tower, and I believe they're now starting to think about developing. They have 3 more pads for towers in the past.
Now, what's also interesting is the retail, I believe, is doing relatively well, right?
I think they just signed a deal, yes, with Nordstrom's. And
Nordstrom's Rack.
Rack, yeah. But that's big box, and the retail in Flushing, I joke when people visit me, I say, welcome to China. You walk around, you see all the signs are in Chinese, and you're seeing small, local.
Are you telling me that
estate.
BJ's and Bob's Discount Furniture doesn't have signs in Chinese over there?
No, it doesn't. And it's very different. It's across from College Point, even though it's 6 or 7 blocks away. It's really not in the center of Flushing. As I mentioned before, that 7 train is the busiest subway station outside of Manhattan. You have so much pedestrian. It's the 3rd busiest, tied for 3rd busiest pedestrian area.
Here's a question. It relates to what you're doing with parking and what's happening. Do you have a parking requirement over there?
We do. 250 cars.
Is that going to be below grade?
1 floor below grade. 1 story below grade.
Now, how often today, because many people, there are no more garages in New York City. That's a dinosaur, they become condominiums. Do you see people requiring, when they're renting or buying in Queens and in the boroughs, the car, or give me the bicycle rack?
When they're buying condominiums or renting?
Both.
Condominiums, you see it more than rentals. I'm sure that, with 1,100 units and, 3,000 plus tenants, you'll fill that amount of parking, no problem. But there's definitely a demand, and as more gets built, it'll continue to be more difficult. Street parking is not the easiest thing.
You brought up before Whole Foods opening up on Bedford Avenue in Williamsburg, and David brought up the 5-star restaurant in Long Island City. Do you see, in a similar manner, perhaps a Whole Foods, a Fairway, or something else opening up in the Long Island City Astoria market?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have, big box retail that'll be available in some of these larger buildings. Like I said, there's 8,000 units coming. There's probably a dozen buildings that have over 300-400 units, which will have adequate space for something of that size.
As a banker, you worry about the 8,000 units? I hear 8,000 units, a lot of units. It's, you know, you have to absorb it, you have to rent it. How do you look at that?
I worry about it.
You know, it's something we watch pretty closely. You know, interestingly, there's no rental development going on in Manhattan really to speak of, right? So, you know, rents have held up remarkably well so far, and grown in Long Island City. They're, you know, the waterfront has virtually no developable sites remaining, and you know, I think it'll endure. I think without the supply in Manhattan, it's bound to continue.
Something that I've been emphasizing probably for the last year, and I think David was on a panel with me last year, I've been emphasizing the transit development oriented streets. If trains are nearby, which is one of the big proximities for Flushing, same thing for Long Island City, it's important. How do you look, because when you go to certain parts of Astoria, or you go to certain parts which are not near a subway, how do you look at those?
Less favorably, frankly. I mean, that's
Because you have
gold.
two major developments, I believe, that were just approved. Powell Cove, you know, one right by
The waterfront?
the waterfront, which are approximately 3,000 units. And their deficiency is they're not near the train. And, you know, ferries are interesting, but I'm not sure how many
Hasn't
people.
entirely.
Ferries are used. They're a good means of transportation now for.
You're moving from Westchester to Long Island City?
Yeah, for us, it's always been very much about where being located close to the subway, and that's always seems to be the driver, the enduring driver.
So here's a big question for the bank, okay? Here's an established real estate family who's been in business a long time. Here's another established company who you know is one of the major leaders in Flushing. Prior to the show, Andrew and I were talking about there are, you know, everybody wants to become a developer. It's, you know, it's like in the blood. You know, I want to be a producer. You know, I want to be a developer. How do you look at, you know, with land prices going up and all the situation, you know, and you know, Andrew's met the good, the bad, and the indifferent. Okay, how do you make a decision of who you're gonna bet the store on?
On the development side, you know, for us, it's about sponsorship is number one, right? And where we pursue development loan opportunities for people with a strong commitment to the market, who strong knowledge of the market, and with experience developing in that market, that's the main.
So you're saying to me, if you know the person said, I'm 3 years out of school and I'm buying a site, you know, I'm buying this 40-foot site and I'm going to build this small development, you're going to say go to the hard money lender as opposed to
yeah, it's just not a fit,
traditional lender.
not a fit for us.
How much higher has the construction cost gone up since you may have initially started on these plans? Is it a 10% or is it a 20% increase?
I can't answer that because, as you say, we have a 10-year horizon. We submitted our RFP to EDC 10 years ago this month, and after being designated in 2005, Katrina and steel in China just killed our budget. But then we've been through 3 cycles now, you know, and then they had the crash, and now it's coming back strong. So we're just finishing our GMP. But it's heating up now, so it's starting to get tough.
Labor's starting to increase. You know, first, a couple of years ago when we were looking at it, it was really about the commodity prices, and now labor is starting to creep up. However, you know, there's still a tremendous amount of people out of work, or construction workers out of work.
But labor is going up, and if I read correctly, I believe you also in the approvals had to make an agreement that you have a union labor, which is more expensive.
We have the same.
You
We're
have union
Flushing
labor.
Commons on the
Okay.
city deal.
Both of these, as opposed to some of the developers who you're representing, who are building, you know, sticks and mortar, as one would say, you know, with, you know, the variety of developers. I mean, what's the different cost for a union development job as opposed to a non-union development job?
Well, we have our own construction company. You know, we're a Taiwanese American development company. We have our diversified, so we have our own construction company, and that builds in Flushing non-union. The Flushing Commons project is city sponsorship. It had to be union. The standard line is it's, like a 15% differential, but in our experience, it's much, much greater.
Usually hear about 20%.
20%.
It's
So
far-
where do you see the next, okay, one of the nice things, like in Bedford Avenue, there was a site where the Whole Foods and the sports club and other things. Where do you see potentially in the Astoria, Long Island City market, potential retail sites?
In Long Island City, with large developments like ours, you can have it within the building. But I see a lot of boutique opportunities within Long Island City, a little smaller, hipper type of spaces. The bigger buildings, again, will have the CVS's and the Duane Reeds and what have you. But there's a great opportunity for smaller retailers to make their way in Long Island City.
Now, I did a show, which people would say it couldn't happen. I did a show called Manufacturing in New York City and Food Production in New York City. And there is still food production and manufacturing in Brooklyn and in Queens. Mm-hmm. Now, do you see that? Do you see food production? Because people like this. I mean, I did Amy's Bread, who's in Long Island City, handmade bakeries over there. Do you see that happening?
No, Flushing's different. I mean, the key about Flushing is it's really a destination for the Asian population in the tri-state area. So on the weekend, everybody comes to shop and to eat. So all the food, it's like China. So you don't see the production. It's distribution and F&B.
Is Flushing taking over for Chinatown?
It's larger than Chinatown, yes.
And I think also, and you see this because you rent, lease, and everything in the city, I don't think Chinatown is being no longer Chinatown. Chinatown and Little Italy are being taken over and is a luxury.
It's become Lower East Side, it's become Nolita, all very popular areas that you're seeing, high teens to $2,500 condo prices.
So here's a question. I talk about Queens. We've spoken about a number of neighborhoods. I haven't spoken about two neighborhoods. I haven't spoken about the Rockaways, which is Queens, and I haven't spoken about the section of Queens, which is Ozone Park, right near Aqueduct Racetrack, where they're doing rather well. Do you see development potentially coming to those sections?
Unfortunately, I'm myopic, so I can't really speak about those neighborhoods, but I'm sure these guys can.
We're just focused on Flushing and China and Manhattan.
We haven't ventured into those areas yet, but I'm certainly sure it'll happen.
Yeah, we've not gotten requests in those markets, and I'm not sure will the market rent there yet justify development.
I think the question on market rent and everything is predicated on the land cost, and it hasn't really taken place in the Rockaways because of the comment that I made before, transportation.
Let's say.
And that, when it's an hour away, it's the same problem that we have in Coney Island. But I think my audience and I have got a pretty good idea of what's happening in Queens. I'd like to thank Andrew, David, my friend Michael, and Matt, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you.